Okay, listen closely. He was pierced for our transgressions. He was crushed for our iniquities.
Punishment that brought us peace was on him, and by his wounds we are healed.
By his wounds we are healed. So where is this from? The Old Testament or the New Testament?
I'm going to say the other one because it doesn't sound like the Tanach.
Shalom, my friends, and welcome to another video where we debunk Jeff Morgan and his Jews for Jesus cronies. I had to make a video about this because the deception here is insane. To see the levels of distortion and deception and just outright lies that Jeff Morgan and his, I don't know who his crony is in this video, but it is absolutely disgusting. And we are going to go through and clean up the mess that they made trying to convince Jews that Jesus is their Messiah and their God and all these ridiculous things that we know not to be true. So without further ado, let's get into it.
ברית החדשה, New Testament. ברית חדשה.
זה ברית חדשה.
New Testament.
It's in the Old Testament.
No way.
Yes.
Old Testament. Tanach. Why do you think that's from the New Testament?
It sounded like they were talking about Jesus.
פה אני חשבתי שזה מדבר על מריה ועל ישו ועל כל זה.
I don't know why. It's a feeling. I can't say why. It's from the Old Testament.
I knew it was a trick.
So this guy is absolutely right. It is a trick, right? If you're ignorant to the idea of what Isaiah is speaking about. It's not a trick if you actually understand that passage of Isaiah. But of course, these are, they're going after people who they deem to be ignorant Jews about what the scriptures are actually saying here. So when we go to Isaiah chapter 53, right, and we see what's going on, sorry, I skipped over it, but here it is right here. It says, they were having them read this line where it says, but he was pained because of our transgressions, crushed because of our iniquities. The chastisement of our welfare was upon him, and with his wound we were healed. So this idea, right, in the consciousness of the world is that Jesus fulfilled this somehow. But think about it logically. How in the world can one claim with any sort of sense of confidence that the reason why they are quote unquote healed is because Jesus did anything for them? It's not possible to do. This is what is known as the placebo effect. I like to call this a spiritual placebo, right? I could say that I was healed, quote unquote. I stopped doing drugs, whatever, thing that was happening, or, like my life was turned around because I believed in the Prophet Muhammad, right? I could say that it was because I believed in Hare Krishna. I could say that because of Joseph Smith, whatever. It does not matter. It is impossible for somebody to go up to you and definitively prove that Jesus is the reason why they stopped doing drugs or why they decided to, pursue a career in something that was meaningful in their life. There's just no way to prove that being the case, right? A placebo is simply a phenomenon that happens when you think that something is supposed to do something for you, and it's so powerful that it can actually cause you to make changes in your life. But not because the placebo actually did anything for you. It's because you have convinced yourself and deluded yourself into thinking that the placebo did something for you. That is what is happening. It's a complete trick of the mind. So yes, it is a trick. When you think about the people who actually attribute it to Jesus, they're tricking themselves into thinking it's about Jesus. Because in the reality of the world we live in today, sin is not done away with, right? That's the Christian claim, that Jesus did away with sin. But Christians sin just as much as Jews do. There's no distinction between them. It's not like a Christian has some immunity to sin in any way, and they claim that in the afterlife they're going to be saved or justified, whatever words they use. But there's no way to prove it. It's complete hearsay and nonsense.
It's no trick. I'm telling you, it's so similar. People think that it's like a Western religion and it has nothing to do with Judaism, but this is so close to Judaism. It's crazy.
That's a straw man. Who cares if it's close to Judaism? It has nothing to do with anything, right? You can argue that Islam is close to Judaism because they are monotheistic and they don't believe in a trinity. That's closer to Judaism in some ways than the idea that Jesus would be a God-man and that we have to believe in his atoning sacrifice and all this nonsense, right? There's nothing in Judaism that claims that this is the only way for you to gain salvation or atonement or forgiveness or whatever through belief that Jesus dies on a cross for you. And that is not the way that Isaiah 53 has been understood either. So,
Crazy.
For the next one, you ready? For to us a
so before we get to the next one, okay, let's look and investigate Isaiah 49, right? Because it says here, and I did some videos on this, debunking Dr. Michael Brown, this one where I go into extreme detail about how Isaiah 53 is, so, and Dr. Brown in that video actually agreed, right? So here when it says, he said to me, you are my servant, O Israel, about whom I will boast. According to Dr. Michael Brown and most Christians, they will admit that in Isaiah 49, verse 3, this is speaking about the same servant as a servant of Isaiah 53. Why is that significant? Because they claim the servant can't be Israel. But when you read this verse explicitly here, it point blank says the servant is Israel, right? Israel isn't secret code word for Jesus. Nowhere in the Tanach is the word Israel used to exclusively refer to the Messiah, son of David, and no one else, unless you're a Christian and you want to make this the sole exception because you're trying to, paint the target around the arrow and say bullseye, this can only refer to Jesus. Israel is Israel is Israel, okay? And in the immediate context, it's at least referring to Isaiah. He said to me, right? So that's already proving that this prophecy is not exclusive to the Messiah, son of David, when it says, you are my servant Israel. So the chronology of this, if you look, and I go into this in very extreme detail in this video here, but we discuss the chronology of Isaiah 49, and we show that the servant first, the role of the servant is to bring back the rest of Jacob, bring back the rest of Israel. So the remnant of Israel, which includes Isaiah the prophet, right, brings back the rest of Israel. And then the servant, when it's reestablished, the tribes of Jacob, and brings back the besieged of Israel, after that point in the future, Israel will serve as a light to the nations. That's where the healing will take place, which hasn't happened yet. But that is the chronology of how the servant heals the world, right? It doesn't say that the Gentiles are going to receive the healing first, on the whole, and then the Jews are going to be like, oh, we were bumbling, stupid servant idiots. We should have believed in Jesus the whole time, which is the narrative that Jews for Jesus would have you understand it. But no, it's the opposite, that the nation of Israel will be restored back to its, former glory, right? Through the remnant, which includes Isaiah, right? Many Christians will make this false dichotomy argument and argue that the servant is completely sinful, and there's like two servants. One is a sinful Israel servant, and one is this, sinless Jesus servant. The problem with that is that Isaiah is a part of, clearly right here, he said to me, right? You can't exclude Isaiah from being a part of the servant of Israel, right? That not, somebody who was Isaiah a sinful, lying, idiot servant, or was Isaiah a righteous servant, right? If he was a bumbling idiot servant, then why are you listening to Isaiah? Why are you even following any of his prophecies? He has to be understood to be righteous, or else why would you follow his prophecies? So when Christians make that false dichotomy, you can just ask them, was Isaiah a righteous prophet? Oh, if he wasn't, then why do you follow him? He's the dumb, deaf, blind servant? then what's there to follow? Right? So it really shoots the Christian argument in the foot. So we're coming up on Tisha B'Av, right? In the next couple days. And this is a fast, right? If you don't know what Tisha B'Av is, then you're probably not a Jew. You probably don't follow the Torah, and you don't fit this prophecy, quite frankly. This Zechariah chapter 8 is a prophecy all about the future Messianic age. And here it says, so said the Lord of hosts, the fast of the 4th month, the fast of the 5th month, the fast of the 7th month, and the fast of the 10th month shall be for the house of Judah, the Jews, for joy and happiness and happy holidays, for love, truth, and peace. Okay, so great. So what are these fast days, right? They're not fast days that you're going to find in the Torah. They are fast days that actually were instigated during the Babylonian, they were initiated during the Babylonian exile to warn the destruction of the temple. All right. And the fast of Av, the 5th month, is the mourning of the Holy Temple. Both holy temples were destroyed in Av. So on the 9th of Av, we commemorate the destruction of both holy temples. This is something that Rabbinic Jews have been doing for the past 2,000 years and beyond. Like I said, if you go in Zechariah chapter 7, it shows that the initiation of the, I believe it was the 5th and the 7th month, it was the, 5th and the 7th, were initiated during the Babylonian exile. So then these two other fasts with the 4th and the 10th are what we commemorate in addition to those fasts that were initiated during that 70-year Babylonian exile. And they all commemorate the destruction of the temple, right? So the idea is that the 3rd temple will be rebuilt, and that's why we won't be fasting anymore. That is what we look forward to. And that is the only group of people who fit these fasts, who actually have a track record of doing these fasts, are Rabbinic Jews, from what I understand, unless you can show me some church group of people that do this. Most Christians have no idea what these fasts are about. But this is a future Messianic prophecy, and it said, so said the Lord of hosts, there will yet be a time when people and inhabitants of many cities shall come, and the inhabitants of one shall go to another, saying, let us go pray before the Lord and entreat the Lord of hosts. I too will go. And many peoples and powerful nations shall come to entreat the Lord of hosts in Jerusalem to pray before the Lord. So the 3rd temple will be built at this point. And so said the Lord of hosts, in those days when 10 men of all the languages of the nations shall take hold of the skirt of a Jewish man, saying, let us go with you, for we have heard that God is with you. There's your healing, Gentiles. The Goyim, right? It says that these nations, the Goyim, will go to the Jews to learn the truth of Torah, to learn the truth of God. Not that the Jews are going to be confused about this and we're going to be like, oh, we need to go to the Gentiles because we missed our Messiah and all this nonsense, right? No, it is the opposite. The Gentiles will go to the Jews for light, to Israel for light, not the other way around. They will be healed through the nation of Israel. The nations will be healed through the nation of Israel and not through, well, you missed your Messiah, so we're going to go to Jesus, and he's going to be our light, and he's going to be... No, none of this was fulfilled by Jesus. You cannot put Jesus in here and claim that he is somehow associated with this when he didn't fulfill any of these prophecies. None of it. None of Zechariah 8 was fulfilled by Jesus. Anyway.
Child is born. A son is given.
And the government shall be upon his shoulder.
ויקרא שמו פלא יועץ אל גיבור.
Everlasting Father.
Prince of Peace, New Testament.
Again, I would assume that this one is from the Brit Hadasha.
New Testament, I think.
The other one. What's it called?
New Testament.
The New Testament.
אני אלך על הברית החדשה.
Something about the Prince of Peace.
Right.
Like it got me right away.
No, I mean, it definitely sounds like New Testament stuff.
Excellent. Tanach.
Really?
Yeah.
So, once again, let's play a game of basically, it's a sleight of hand trick right here. You want to isolate a verse, right, and not show what the rest of the verses are speaking about. That's what we can do with Isaiah chapter 9, right? So, they were referring to this verse. For a child is born to us, a son is given to us, and the authority is upon his shoulder. the wondrous counselor, the mighty God, and the everlasting Father calls his name the Prince of Peace, right? So the idea here, right? The next verse, all you have to do is read it. It says, to him who increases the authority and for peace without end on David's throne and on his kingdom, to establish it and support it with justice and righteousness from now into eternity. The zeal of the Lord of the hosts shall accomplish this. What does now mean? Does now mean hundreds of years in the future? No, this is about King Hezekiah in the immediate context. And if you're a Christian and you're going to start typing in the comments saying, well, but this rabbi says it's about the Messiah. Shut up. I've already addressed this 1,000 times in my videos, right? I do not care if a rabbi says this is about the Messiah. Isaiah 53 rabbis say it's about the Messiah. But the Messiah is inclusive of the nation of Israel, okay? Same thing with this, right? Hezekiah is a precursor to the Messiah, okay? He is of the kingdom of David, and he was a righteous king who brought a significant amount of peace to the nation of Israel, okay? That's what he did, all right? There's no way around it. He was successful in his reign as a king. He was able to stave off Israel's enemies through his faith in God, and he set the precedent for the kingdom of Judah moving forward. And really no other king ever did what he was able to do. Yoshayahu, his great-grandson, was able to come close, but really Hezekiah was really untouchable in terms of what he did for the nation. And ultimately, this prophecy has to have some level of contemporary context because of these words, me'ata v'ad olam, from now into eternity, right? It doesn't mean hundreds of years in the future is when this starts. No, this prophecy started in Isaiah's generation. There is no way around that. So, and once again, you look at this verse, right? Obviously, we know, I did a whole video on this, when it says mighty God, it's referring to the pun on Hezekiah's name. Chizkiyahu, Hezekiah means God strengthens, right? So this isn't giving exclusive divine rights to the subject of who this is speaking about, right? So, and then, of course, when we think about the words Prince of Peace, right? What peace did Jesus bring to the world? When did Jesus even rule as a king? Jesus, anything that Hezekiah did, right, is under under him being a king. Jesus never had any sort of kingship. So once again, this goes back to that spiritual placebo, is that Christians claim, oh, well, Jesus is a king, or he'll come back and be a king. But there was no way, even in the New Testament, he wasn't a king. He never ruled as a king. So Hezekiah wins every time when you compare the fulfillment of the prophecy, right? That's important to recognize. And I made a video all about that. Once again, starring our favorite, it's called Heads of Jews for Jesus Refute Their Jewishness, Isaiah 9, the child is born. So if you want a more in-depth study, there it is. I also wanted to emphasize again, when it comes to the healing, right, that people speak about, the spiritual placebo. Look up this man. This man here, Marshall Applewhite, he claimed to be the second coming of Jesus. And he was able to get some people to do some pretty heinous things. Why would someone die for something they believe to be a lie? Ask the followers of Marshall Applewhite. Oh, wait, you can't, because they're not with us anymore today, unfortunately. You can do your research on that. But you can see, once again, a spiritual placebo.
One more.
They will look on me, whom they have pierced, and they will mourn for him. I'm going to say, as one mourns for an only son, and they will weep bitterly over him like the bitter weeping of a firstborn. I'm going to say New Testament, but... It's probably Old Testament.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, that's right. I completely manipulated the text so that you didn't see the full context of anything, right? Zechariah 12, right? I've done entire videos on this as well, is a future prophecy, right? This is actually a prophecy that encapsulates what's going on today in Israel, that all the nations of the world, right? It says, it shall come to pass on that day, I will make Jerusalem a stone of burden for all peoples, all who bear it shall be gashed, and all the nations of the earth shall gather about it. So you see the stage is set for this. You know, the Jews are in Jerusalem today, right? And it says that on that day I will make Judah a fiery stove among wood and a brand among fire sheaves, and they shall consume on the right and the left all the nations round about, and Jerusalem shall stay in its place in Jerusalem. So yeah, don't mess with Jerusalem. That's kind of the message here. And the Lord shall save the tents of Judah first, so that the boasting house of David and the boasting of the inhabitants of Jerusalem shall not increase over Judah. None of this was fulfilled by Jesus. There's nothing here that Jesus fulfilled. On that day, the Lord shall protect the inhabitants of Jerusalem, and the weakest of them shall be on that day like David, and the house of David shall be like angels, like the angel of the Lord before them. Now, this is significant, right? Because the house of David is inclusive of the Messiah, son of David. Of course, that's the definition of what, you know, that the house of David would be, right? The Messiah, son of David, would be amongst those of this house of David that are supposed to be like angels, right? During this final battle in Jerusalem. That is, of course, a future prophecy that Jesus never fulfilled. And it shall come on that to pass on that day, I will seek to destroy all the nations that come upon Jerusalem. So then you see this verse, this infamous verse that Christians take out of context, that is a future prophecy. And it says, I will pour out upon the house of David and the inhabitants of Jerusalem. Remember, the house of David includes the Messiah, a spirit of grace and supplications, and they shall look to me, right? And the Christian translations say, because of whom they pierced, right? But the issue with this translation that they, you know, that they use is that they are assuming, right, that God is being pierced because they assume that God is the Messiah. Yet the verse explicitly says that the house of David is the ones doing the looking upon whoever this or whoever these pierced and you know, individuals happen to be, right? It doesn't necessarily have to be a singular person, but because remember, this battle, there's going to be a lot of innocent casualties and a lot of mourning over what happened. You see in Zechariah 14, it describes that, you know, half the city of Jerusalem is going into exile. So there's going to be mourning. So there's no reason to assume that the mourning is going to come from the idea of somebody who was pierced 2,000 years ago. That would completely miss the point of what's happening in this. This is a battle. Many people are going to die. A lot of people that, you know, are probably undeserving of death, right, on some level. So there's going to be mourning for that reason. It's not, you know, how dare somebody assume that in this battle, the only person anybody's going to be mourning is Jesus from 2,000 years ago. It's absurd. It's absolutely really repugnant to think that that would be the interpretation. But this is what, you know, the majority of Christians believe. A lot of them just don't know. And if you want to see how to debunk this, I actually brought it up to Dr. Brown on his own show. The house of David is the key.
For truth. Let's go to Yehuda in Brooklyn. Thanks for calling the Line of Fire.
Shalom Aleichem.
Aleichem shalom.
You're again, Dr. Brown.
Thanks. Yes, sir.
Thanks for having me. I had a question about the house of David in the Tanach and how it relates to the future Messiah. To start off, I just wanted to know, we're in agreement that in the Tanakh, when it mentions the house of David, that would be inclusive of the Messiah, son of David?
Yes, I mean, ultimately, he's included, the promises to the house of David culminate in the promise of the Messiah. Yes, sir.
Awesome. So when I read Zechariah chapter 12, right, which is a future prophecy about the Messiah, I think we both agree, since you agreed with me that the house of David would be inclusive of the Messiah. So when I look at Zechariah 12:10, it says, I will pour out upon the house of David, which includes the Messiah, right?
No. To be clear.
You see, he has to backtrack on what he initially said, right? So the reason why is that just as this individual did in the video, right, when he presented the scripture, he didn't present it as the house of David, right? So, right, he presented it as, let's go back and we'll watch it and you'll see when he presents Zechariah 12, he doesn't even mention the part about the house of David because that's the sleight of hand trick, right?
They will look on me whom they have pierced, and
that's how he starts it off, right? One more. He just immediately like goes into that. He doesn't even give the part where it says the house of David. So this guy didn't even have a chance. He was already starting reading it from out of context. The verse wasn't even put in context, but at least he would have a chance to understand, well, who's the house of David? That includes the Messiah. So the Messiah would be in, that's why Dr. Brown had to renege on his position when he realized, well, if the house of David is a part of who the Messiah is, right? If the Messiah is inclusive among them, then that would mean in Zechariah 12 that the Messiah is piercing God. Because the house of David would include the Messiah. And that's why the Christian interpretation makes absolutely no sense. But they have to manipulate the scripture to make it fit the way that they want. It's really sad.
And they will mourn for him. I'm going to say, as one mourns for an only son, and they will weep bitterly over him like the bitter weeping of a firstborn. I'm going to say New Testament, but it's probably Old Testament.
Yeah, that's right. Can I ask you, why did you think that the parts sounded like New Testament?
Why did you think? Why? Yeah, because you set it up so that he was reading part of a verse that didn't include what, he would at least have a chance at understanding, there's something fishy about this. The Messiah, son of David, is a part of the house of David. Maybe you are manipulating the verse to make it appear as though it's referring to Jesus. And that's what you have over and over and over again in these prophecies. Jesus didn't fulfill any of this. It's only because of the fact that Christians attribute these ideas to Jesus, right? The Jews aren't mourning about Jesus. The Jews couldn't care less about Jesus on the whole, right? Because he didn't do anything to fulfill the Messianic prophecies. So it's really just an insane cope on the part of the Christians to look at a future prophecy that hasn't happened yet and then say, well, this is all about Jesus. Absolutely absurd. But this is the best they got. They have to manipulate verses, play this sleight of hand trick, and then be like, who is this speaking about? And it's not impressive to anybody who really knows the truth of the context of these verses and that Jesus didn't fulfill any of them.
Oh, it sounded like he was getting pierced to the cross or something.
And this is 700 years before Jesus is born.
Right. Who is it talking about?
Last one. For I'm not ashamed of the gospel.
Sharei koach Elohim.
To everyone who believes, to the Jew first, and also to the Greek. I'm going to say the new again, but is it the old?
This is the New Testament.
Oh, this is the new. Okay, I don't think they were talking too much about Greeks in the Old Testament.
So that shows the ignorance of, this is why we have to make these videos, because these people, Jeff Morgan and his crony, they prey upon the ignorant, right? They know that these people are not familiar with what the Tanach actually says, so they manipulate the scriptures to make it appear as though, the New Testament is some sort of impressive work, And once again, right, we already read in Zechariah chapter 8, it is not the Jews who are going to be coming to the Gentiles for truth. Rather, the Gentiles will be coming to the Jews to learn the truth of God. So, and if you hear these stories of Dr. Michael Brown, and rest assured, guys, I'm going to make a video on that Dr. Michael Brown video that they did on this channel too. So don't worry. I just wanted to get this one out of the way first because I figured it would be easier to knock out. But yeah, this Jeff Morgan individual, I'm sure, when you hear these stories of these Jews coming to, the faith in Jesus, it's usually not through a Jew. it's usually through a Christian, that they, so they're not fulfilling anything, right? As far as, being a light to the nations, as it says in Isaiah 49, right? If they're getting their news from Gentiles, their good news from Gentiles, they're missing, they're putting the cart before the horse, right? We're not supposed to be following away from Torah and learning about Jesus. Rather, we're supposed to be following the Torah so that we can teach the nations and be a light to them ultimately.
ברית החדשה?
Yes.
Really?
You got it. You got it. The New Testament?
Yeah.
You're right. Bro, we got 4 for 4. 4 for 4. You win. You win the Brit Chadasha.
And the Brit Chadasha, once again, is a misnomer. I've done plenty of videos on this, but remember, they don't touch on it as much in this video, but if you're familiar with my channel, we talk about this all the time. The very fact that you have Jews trying to teach other Jews about what they claim the new covenant is, the Brit Chadasha, proves that the new covenant has not been made yet. Because under the new covenant, it says, "And no longer shall one teach his neighbor, or shall one teach his brother, saying, Know the Lord, for they shall all know me, from their smallest to their greatest, says the Lord. I will forgive their iniquity, and their sin I will no longer remember." So here you have these, charlatan Jews going around teaching them to know who they claim Jesus is, who they claim is God, chas v'shalom. That proves that we're not under the new covenant yet, right? Because under the new covenant, we wouldn't have to teach our fellow Jews to know the Lord, for we would all know him, from the least of us to the greatest of us. So these people going around trying to teach ignorant Jews about who they claim their Lord and Savior would be, undermines the entirety of their message. It's extremely ironic, but I mean, that completely negates their message.
You initially thought it was from the Tanakh. And why?
We are the chosen ones by God.
Yes.
And something about talking about the non-Jews is more modern.
That's a great point. Did you know that God told Abraham that from him, from his seed, מהזרע שלו, will become a great blessing to all the nations?
Wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah, so...
You see, they're, this is like Bible 101, and this guy doesn't know the basics because this is their prey. They go after Jews who just don't know the basics, right? So this is why we have to educate our own first before, people like Jeff Morgan and these spiritual predators go around and, try and snatch Jewish souls away and follow a false God and a false Messiah, known as Jesus or Yeshua or whatever you call him, the false New Testament.
So this is why we're here, because we want people to understand that the Tanakh gives a promise, and the New Testament fulfills that promise in Yeshua. Like Yeshua, he's the only person that can fit the description of the Mashiach, only person.
Trust me, bro, he's the only person. Only person. Guys, just watch my videos. I'll put the links in the description. Jesus didn't fulfill the Messianic prophecies. There's no reason to put your faith in Jesus or Yeshua. No reason.
And so we're trying to teach people that, open the eyes and look for yourselves. Read some of the Tanakh, read the New Testament, and you can see for yourself what it's talking about, because we feel that our life is on the line here. And so if people aren't thinking about how they can secure their future with God, and their last day comes, it's scary.
Yeah, it is.
So we just want to share with people where they can find eternal salvation and forgiveness.
Right, so this is really a fear-mongering technique, right, is basically what this is. And it's not rooted anywhere in the Tanakh, right? There's nowhere in the Tanakh that says the only way to have your sins forgiven is to believe that Jesus died for your sins on a cross. I did an entire debate about it. I would debate Jeff Morgan on this just as well. It's just not there, right? It's a complete nothing burger, as they say in today's culture. But that's what it is. It's Jesus didn't do any of this. None of these prophecies. We already went through it. He didn't fulfill any of them. It's only because society attributes Jesus being the Prince of Peace. Where's the peace? Jesus healed my sins. Where's the healing? Jesus was pierced and everyone's mourning for him. That's a complete future prophecy, right? That's unfolding before our eyes today. But why would we be looking to Jesus for our salvation when the whole point is that we're supposed to be the house of David, which is inclusive of the Messiah, son of David, is going to ultimately bring us that salvation, not God being pierced that would be separate and apart from the house of David. That makes no sense. The Messiah, son of David, is of the house of David. I'll put the video in the description with 2 Samuel chapter 7, verses 12 through 16, which describes the eternal covenant that God made with David. But it doesn't say that Chas v'sholom, the Messiah will be a God in the flesh, and you have to believe in this God in the flesh being pierced and all this nonsense. None of that is articulated. But if you want to use the sleight of hand trick and manipulate verses and take out all sorts of stuff, I guess you could come to some pretty wild conclusions, like the idea that Jesus would be the Messiah or God or whatever. Absurd.
Wow, that's nice.
Yeah, so if you're interested, we have a New Testament in Hebrew we can give to you for you to read.
Really?
Yeah.
Why not?
Okay.
I love to.
Cool, let me get it for you. You might want to actually start in the Tanakh on the last book, Malachi, and go right into here.
Here's the irony of that. So Malachi chapter 3, right? This talks about the third temple, right? And then it says that the Levites are going to be purified and that they shall offer up an offering to the Lord with righteousness, right? And then the offerings of Judah and Jerusalem shall be pleasant to the Lord as in the days of old and in former years. None of this was fulfilled in Jesus, right? Otherwise, we would have a third temple and the Levites would be, functioning in the way that they did in the days of old, and the offerings of Judah and Jerusalem would be pleasant to the Lord as in the days and in former years. Well, Christians will say, well, no, that never happened. Okay, well then don't attribute this passage to Jesus, right? Because Jesus didn't fulfill it. Where are the Levites, back to their days of old in the former years when they used to offer up offerings of righteousness? No, Israel's a bunch of sinful, bumbling idiots, they say. And only Jesus can save them, but they don't know their Messiah. Okay, then don't tell me that Jesus fulfilled any part of Malachi chapter 3. Because he didn't. So, and by the way, there are no rabbinic commentaries that I have come across that say that this refers to the second temple. This is all the rabbinic commentaries that I have seen understand this as the future third temple, because none of this happened. When were the Levites purified so that their offerings would be pleasing to the Lord like in the days of old and in former years? Jesus didn't accomplish that, right? I thought the temple was destroyed after Jesus came on the scene. He didn't purify the Levites. So this has to be a future prophecy about the third temple. No way around it. So yeah, read from Malachi. And then from there, you can recognize that Jesus can't have fulfilled any of those prophecies, even though the New Testament attributes them to Jesus. Once again, it's the sleight of hand trick. You can take a verse out of context and say, oh, look, the messenger of the covenant, oh, it's Jesus. But what about the rest of it? Jesus never fulfilled that, so this has to be a future prophecy.
All right.
And you'll see a narrative that takes you from here to there. It's very smooth. It's a smooth transition. It's wonderful. And read this.
We see how smooth that transition is, that, we're bouncing around. We're ignoring the contemporary context of all of the prophecies that were mentioned there. We're saying that, Isaiah is, some sort of not righteous prophet, if you want to take their interpretation of Isaiah 53. Why even follow Isaiah, right? Why, when it says from now into eternity, so smooth. Just ignore that part and just say, well, no, the Prince of Peace has to be many years in the future, and even though Jesus didn't bring about peace. But no, that'll happen in the second coming. It's so smooth. Such a smooth transition. It just fits together perfectly. No coping second coming theology needed, because clearly he already finished the job. So smooth.
This, because this is for our Jewish people. If you open it up and you read the first verse, open it up, read the first verse of the New Testament.
ספר היחסים של ישוע המשיח בן דוד בן אברהם. אברהם הוליד את יצחק, יצחק הוליד את יעקב, ויעקב הוליד את יהודה אחיו.
Okay, so does this sound like something foreign to our Jewish people?
No.
Does that?
If only you kept reading and you recognized that this is where the whole virgin birth idea comes into play, which invalidates Jesus being the Messiah if he doesn't have an earthly father. And we know we've already gone through the daughters of Slavchad and, and weekly parsha with Yehuda, showing that they had to marry within their tribe, and that even in the exception where there's only daughters being born, it's still dependent on the patrilineal descent of the father, right? That determines the child's tribe. So there is no way around it. If Jesus was born of a virgin, he wouldn't have any sort of tribe, and he could not be the Messiah. But that's the narrative of the New Testament. That's the smooth transition.
That sound like something zar?
Not at all.
Something foreign? Something from the Christians? It's theirs, it's not ours?
No, it sounds mine. It sounds very Jewish.
Right, and all you needed to do was look at the very first sentence to find out.
Yeah.
All you have to do, I mean, even if the New Testament, they're taking that out of context, like I said. Yes, you can look at verses in isolation and come to some pretty absurd conclusions. And these Jews for Jesus people are prime examples of that. So, yeah, you can come up with, you could argue that all sorts of ridiculous things happen if you take the Tanakh out of context, as well as their false New Testament.
So,
I mean, you might end up like this guy and claim yourself to be the second coming of Jesus. I'm sure you all aspire to be like him. Look him up. Marshall Applewhite, Heaven's Gate. It was the Hellbach Comet. Second coming of Jesus, friends. You don't believe him? You don't believe Marshall Applewhite? What's wrong with you? How could you deny his divine existence? How could you?
So look through that, and you can contact us if you want to, if you have any questions.
Amazing.
All right?
Thank you very
much.
much.
You were amazing.
Thank you.
I think you need a lot of faith to say that this has nothing to do with Judaism.
I think you need a lot of faith to say that you are an actual person of faith who actually believes what you're saying. How can you be? It makes no sense. How can you be this? I mean, it's like borderline evil, like at this point, like to see the depths they will go to deceive Jews, right? I don't care if it has a Jewish tinge to it. You can speak in Hebrew and say rega, rega, rega. That doesn't mean that you are presenting an authentic message that is consistent with Torah. Because do you think this guy keeps Shabbat? You think this guy keeps kosher? No. These guys don't care about that. They just care about Jesus dying on a cross and that he supposedly resurrected. As this guy. I'm just kidding. They don't believe he's this guy. But some people do. Some people did. And they're not with us today. Why would they die for something they believe to be a lie? Resurrection.
Yeah, and it's important for us to be able to share with our Jewish people the Jewishness of the New Testament, and not the fact that it's just Jewish, but that it delivers on the promises of the Old Testament.
Yeah, I love.
Yeah, that's why we have a second coming theology, because he delivered so well. Yeah. This guy, literally, I don't know, does he get under your skin? He's just, so overly enthusiastic about nothing. Yeah. it really delivers the promises of not fulfilling the prophecies that it claims to fulfill when Jesus never ruled as a king and he never really healed anybody and sin still exists in the world. And Zechariah 12 has nothing to do with anything that happened. It's a future prophecy about the house of David, which includes the Messiah, and not that the Messiah is going to be pierced. I can say this over and over again, and I'm sure there's still going to be people that don't get it. But for those that want to listen, there's nothing that Jesus fulfilled. There's just no way to prove that he fulfilled any of this, any of the prophecies that they went over in the video. It's only because society has attributed these things to him, not because he did any of these things. It could have just as well been anyone else. You could have made up a myth story about anyone else, and you could have ended up with the same situation. There's nothing unique about Jesus.
How people were so surprised to see prophecies that were happening 700 years before Jesus, and think that it was written in the New Testament.
Right, and we didn't even tell them that it was Jesus. They just said, this looks like Jesus.
How can this not be Jesus?
How could this not be Muhammad, right? You see Muslims, and if you're familiar with Muslim theology, they'll look at things in the Torah and they'll say that, you know, the prophet like Moses was Muhammad, or they'll use, like, that proves to you that this is once again painting that target around the arrow and saying bullseye, right? You're all familiar with that analogy if you follow Counter-Missionary work. That's what this is. It's not impressive.
That needs to be the question.
Exactly.
I hope you guys enjoy this type of video. If you guys like this type of video, don't forget to
like,
share,
subscribe,
and comment.
And you can delete my comments because you guys don't want to engage at all with anything that I do because you're scared. I said it, and if you want to debate, I'm here, Jeff Morgan. I am here. The last time, so to be fair, when I commented on this channel, they didn't delete my comments, but they ignored my challenge to them. So I will issue the challenge once again, Jeff Morgan, and whoever this guy is. Let's do a debate on this, whether or not Jesus is the Jewish Messiah according to the Tanach. Let's have a debate. Please like and subscribe to this channel if you want me to have an opportunity to debate and make some noise. And let Jeff Morgan and these people know. And hopefully we can get something off the ground. I hope this video has been a blessing to you all. Shalom Aleichem.